What's up, people? Back again for another edition of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. This is the Thomas Take Fantasy Football Primer. Back again, year 2 of the Fantasy Football Primer. I went through the quarterbacks, the running backs, my top 10 for each position. And I'm going to be ad-libbing this one. I didn't even write this one down. This is going to be straight from the heart, in the words of whoever sang that song. Straight from the heart. Whatever. I'm not a singer. Don't call me one ever, because I'm not one. So, that being said, who is my number 1 fantasy football wide receiver this year? If I were to pick one receiver, the first receiver off of every board, that should be the question. Who should be the number 1 fantasy football receiver off your fantasy draft boards? And there's a lot of big names. The wide receiver position is a hopping position in the National Football League. It is a position that will only grow in popularity based on the high volume of passing that has been conducted, shall I say, in the National Football League. But who would be the number 1 receiver off my board? Who would be the number 1 receiver on my board? Who should be the number 1 receiver? The first receiver taken. That man is number 84. That man is number 84 for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Antonio Brown. He's the number 1 wideout who's averaged 1,579 yards and 11 touchdowns over the last 4 seasons. This guy's a straight killer with Big Ben at quarterback, with Le'Veon Bell at running back, with Antonio Brown at wide receiver. The Steelers have a stacked offense, and it's not just those 3 guys. You have James Conner at running back, who played for Pitt, backing up Le'Veon Bell, who I really like. I think he has the potential to be a franchise running back. You also have Martavis Bryant back, who I really like. They have a stacked offense, but it has to stay healthy. My number 2 wideout for the 2017 season would be Julio Jones. Jones is vital to the success of Matty Ryan, of Matty Ice, as I like to call him. I think that this guy is legit. I think that this guy, when healthy, is uncoverable. There's no matchup that is a bad one for him. The only one that I can think of is Joe Hayden, for whatever reason. Joe Hayden has caused him problems. Number 3, and this is going to be a bit of a shock to you, Michael Thomas, the New Orleans Saints wide receiver. I have Thomas ranked over names that you will hear very soon, but I think Michael Thomas will be a stud wideout. He was a stud at the University of Ohio State, the OSU, known as OSU. I think he's going to do fantastic. I think he's going to be the go-to guy for Drew Brees. I drafted Michael Thomas 6th overall. I thought that was high, but I knew I was going to get Drew Brees. I wanted Drew Brees. I thought, if I know I'm going to get Drew Brees, if I know I'm going to reach for Drew Brees, why not get his best receiver? And Brees does spread the ball around, but I like me some Michael Thomas. And it might have something to do with his last name. I don't know. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But I think it has something to do with his work ethic on and off the field. I think this guy is the legit breakout wide receiver of 2017. Next up, number 4 on my wide receiver board, Jordy Nelson, wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers. He's Aaron Rodgers' go-to guy. If Aaron Rodgers is the number 1 quarterback, you definitely want his number 1 receiver, and that is Jordy Nelson. Coming off that knee injury a couple years ago, he hasn't missed much of a beat. Odell Beckham would be number 5. I'm going to write these down so I don't lose track. Odell Beckham would be number 5. You have a powerful duo in OBJ and Brandon Marshall. I think having Brandon Marshall on the roster will only help Eli Manning and OBJ. Number 6 would be Mike Evans. the Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receiver Mike Evans has put together a really underrated resume. And realistically, I could have Mike Evans third, ahead of Michael Thomas, ahead of Jordy Nelson, ahead of OBJ, but I'm not necessarily sold on Jameis Winston being this Air McNair-like quarterback quite yet. I know he's got a lot of potential. I know he can ball, no doubt about that. But I'm just not fully sold yet. He needs to show me more. It's only year 2, and that's really how I see it. Number 8, I should say, would be Doug Baldwin, the Seattle Seahawks wide receiver. He has formed a really underrated duo with Russell Wilson. Fantastic duo. I think that they are easily one of the most underrated duos in football in terms of quarterback, wide receiver. I like Dougie Baldwin. I hated on him a lot because I'm like, Doug Baldwin. His name sounds like a bowler. He sounds like a science teacher or something like that. I didn't see Doug Baldwin as one of these elite names. He didn't have that flash to him. But much like another, I'm not comparing the two, but much like another wide receiver great for the Seattle Seahawks, Steve Largent, Baldwin is clutch. He does what he needs to do. He's consistent, and he has big games. Number 9 would be, throw up that X, Dez Bryant. Dez is only number 9 because of the fact that the run game dimension with Zeke, as of now, has been taken out of their offense, and I think that's actually going to hurt Dez Bryant. I don't think that will help him. I think it's going to hurt him because defenses will know that Dak Prescott needs to get the ball to his number 1 wide receiver. So to start the season, I have Dez Bryant in at number 9. I think that he is much better than that, but we will see. My number 10 wide receiver, and this is a guy that I have in multiple leagues already, and I'm not biased in saying that he's the number 10 and that he's inside the top 10, but my number 10 wide receiver is Golden Tate. Golden Tate has been fantastic the last couple seasons in Detroit. Since his move from Seattle to Detroit, it has turned him into a complete player, a complete wide receiver. And I want to pull up the numbers just to let you guys know that this guy is no joke. This is not the Golden Tate that was in Seattle. This is a new Golden Tate. And I want to read the write-up that ESPN wrote about him. So, to quote ESPN, Golden Tate has been on the field for at least 87% of his team snaps in 4 consecutive seasons, 1 with Seattle, 3 with Detroit. He's averaging 7.6 targets and a 0.4 carries per game during that span. Last season, Tate ranked 17th among wide receivers in fantasy points, including 7th after Week 5. He's one of 4 NFL players who have caught 90-plus passes each of the past 3 seasons. He doesn't score many touchdowns, 14 total in 3 seasons with Detroit, but did show some upside by posting a top 10 fantasy week in 31% of his outings, 7th best. The 29-year-old is an underrated wide receiver, too, who belongs in the wide receiver mix on non-PPR, non-points per reception. I don't know, guys. He gets targeted. He catches the ball. He makes big plays. He has big games. That screams top 10 to me. And he's a solid wide receiver, too. Solid. I currently am in a situation where I have him as a wide receiver 1. But that's neither here nor there. I will put him in my top 10. I will give him the credit where credit is due. Golden Tate has been an interesting receiver and a hot commodity in Detroit the last 3 seasons. So there's my top 10. Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, Michael Thomas, Jordy Nelson, Odell Beckham Jr., Mike Evans, A.J. Green, Doug Baldwin, Dez Bryant, Golden Tate. And to touch on A.J. Green, this dude is one of the best deep threats in all of football. I didn't really touch on his credentials, but Andy Dalton loves throwing him the ball. I really think he's made Andy Dalton he's given Andy Dalton a career, to be honest. I'm not that high on Andy Dalton. I don't think he's that great. I think he's okay, but I think his supporting cast props him up beyond what he is actually capable of. And yes, he does get A.J. Green the ball, but A.J. Green is a mammoth of a target, and he's a freak wide receiver. So, that being said, who is the one wide receiver that I am very excited about, wide receiver that I believe could crack into this top 10? One guy, if I'm looking at one guy, who is that guy? That guy is Oakland Raiders wide receiver Amari Cooper, who, according to USA Today's Sports Weekly magazine, for the 2017 fantasy football season, Amari Cooper is ranked 17th, but I could definitely see him being a wide receiver that could finish inside the top 10. Why? The Oakland Raiders have added another dimension to their offense in Marshawn Lynch. I think that's only going to open things up for Amari Cooper moving forward. So, if you're in a PPR, that does dictate when you should take a wide receiver. Because some PPR leagues are a point, some PPR leagues are a half a point, 0.5 or 1 point. So, that does dictate when you should take a wide receiver. And I think that, to me, picking second overall in a PPR, I took David Johnson. But you want to know where you're going to go from there. And you have a real wealth of wide receivers compared to running backs. The second tier, from 15 down, you have Pryor, Cooks, Cooper, Kelvin Benjamin, Alshon Jeffrey, T.Y. Hilton, Devontae Adams. You have some names out there that you could look to add because of the fact you used your first round pick on a running back. You don't have to get one of these top 3 wide receivers. You can maybe get a running back and then get a wide receiver. I look to take a wide receiver in one of the first 3 rounds, but not with my first pick. That's personally how I look at the fantasy football draft in terms of the wide receiver position. So that was the Thomas Take today. Thank you for tuning in to the Fantasy Football Primer. We'll be talking about tight ends coming up next, and I'm very excited to give my ranking the top 10 tight ends for the fantasy football season. Who do I believe will be that sleeper tight end this season? Tune in. We'll be right back.